So real quick, a brief poll just to see who our audience is regarding your role at your institution. If you could just either text the code to 37607 or submit the code online to http://pollev.com. And we'll give you just a minute or two for everyone to respond and poll everywhere to start calculating that. It's funny how the numbers change so drastically. Great, and we'll move on to the next poll. Well, that's still probably going to calculate. Just one last poll before we get started so we know how much time to spend on universal design. How familiar are you with universal design for instruction? 1 being not familiar at all to 5 being very familiar. And again, if you could text the code to 37607 or submit it online at http://pollev.com. We'll wait just another minute or two for everybody to be able to submit and pull everywhere to start seeing all the submissions. Looks like most of us fall right in the middle. Okay, go ahead. The slide. Great. So as I mentioned, we'll begin by laying the groundwork to give you a frame of reference for why we've been looking at applying UDI to online and blended courses. We'll start by highlighting some of the changing landscape in higher education. Go ahead with the slide. According to the literature and statistics collected by the government in a variety of studies, today's typical student was the non-traditional student of the past. Now, what do I mean by that? Shortly after 2020, minority students will outnumber whites on college campuses. Non-traditional age students, meaning those older than what we typically associate with a traditional student, meaning 18 to 24-year-olds, will comprise a steady portion of college students. And more students will be taking classes part-time from multiple institutions while also juggling multiple responsibilities, including work and family. Also, it's anticipated that more students with disabilities will enroll, which actually we are already seeing in the Department of Ed statistics. And those students will come to us with different types of disabilities than we've seen in the past, adding more complexities to the classroom. Also, more veterans are enrolling in college, and many of them have been diagnosed with TBI, traumatic brain injury, or PTSD. And students with intellectual disabilities will be pursuing post-secondary education and training. As I mentioned, we know that the numbers of students with disabilities entering higher education is growing. In 2009, students with disabilities made up about 11% of all college students. Of that population, about 1/3 were diagnosed with ADHD and LD, or learning disabilities. And in fact, according to WebAIM, learners with cognitive disabilities are the largest disability group worldwide. At the same time that our student population is changing, we are seeing an increase in the numbers of online courses being offered and students taking those courses. According to Allen and Seaman, over 5.6 million students were taking at least one online course during the fall 2009 term, which means almost 1/3 of all our college students now take at least one online course during any given semester. That's a 17% increase over the number reported the previous year, and that far exceeds the 1.2% growth rate of overall higher education student enrollment. Yet, web accessibility has focused on physical disabilities such as blindness rather than cognitive access, which is why we looked at applying the construct of UDI to online and blended courses. So before I move into looking at UDI, let me pause for a moment for any questions on what we just touched on regarding the changes to our student population or the numbers of online and blended courses. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll just move on. So what is universal design for instruction? To give you some perspective, one of my colleagues here at UConn created this timeline on the barrier-free movement, which really took hold in the 1950s with the return home of World War II veterans. And you can see it was not until the mid-1980s that universal design was defined and then not applied to learning and teaching until the late 1990s and early 2000s. So UDI as a construct is fairly young in the broader scope. Universal design focused on architecture. It was founded by Ron Mace. He was a childhood polio survivor who became an architect and also used a wheelchair. Universal design is defined as the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. Just a couple examples then that we might come across in our daily lives would include automatic sliding doors, curb cuts, or the items pictured on our slide. The idea is that items are designed to be used by the widest segment of our population without the retrofit or after-the-fact accommodation. So here at UConn, some of our colleagues took the architectural construct of universal design and applied it to instruction at the post-secondary level, developing universal design for instruction. And UDI then is defined as the proactive design and use of inclusive instructional strategies that benefit a broad range of learners, including students with disabilities. And having worked with faculty for the past several years on this project, I would say the key words in that really are proactive design. It's thinking about the broad range of students and learners you're going to have in your course, whether you see them face-to-face or in a completely online environment before the class even begins. UDI is guided by 9 principles, which are adapted and defined for the post-secondary learning environment. The 9 principles of UDI reflect the 7 principles of universal design that were developed by the Center for Universal Design at North Carolina State, and 2 additional principles that reflect evidence-based practices in working with students with learning and attentional problems, and really came out of the work of Chickering and Gamson. And in the interest of time, because we have a lot to cover, I'm not going to define each of the 9 principles. However, if you go to our website, which is www.udi.uconn.edu, under professional development, there are 2 tables that list out the principles with definitions. One is just the principles with definitions, and the second table has the principles, definitions, and examples of what that principle might look like or how it might manifest in the digital learning environment. And we'll talk much more about the website and accessing the website as we move through the presentation. So before we move on, are there any questions then regarding UDI, universal design?
What would UDI adjustments look like for other kinds of disabilities, not hearing impairment or visual impairment?
Do you understand the question completely?
So what adjustments would what would UDI look like for students who are not hearing or visually impaired? So cognitive disabilities, what is UDI? How would we apply it?
We'll talk about it
Okay,
later on.
so there was a question regarding what UDI looks like specifically for cognitive types of disabilities, in other words, not blindness or not a physical disability, and we'll address that when we start talking about the application of the e-tools. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, great. Then I'm going to introduce Nick Gelbar and have him move over to the microphone. He's going to discuss the faculty and student needs assessment and some of the results that we found.
So as a product team, we conducted surveys and interviews of students and faculty, and these students and faculty revealed advantages, challenges, and recommendations to online instructors of the things they need to consider when they develop online courses. For starters, the students revealed several advantages. One advantage of online courses is having continuous access to rich resources. In concert with that, they also have the ability in these courses to work at their own pace, meaning they can continually access these resources, go back to them, and access them until they feel like they've learned the material and may get to set that pace, whereas in a traditional on or face-to-face class, they would not have that ability. The other advantage is, since these students are non-traditional students, they enjoy the flexibility of not having to commute to campus. Finally, the final advantage that students see in these classes is the ability to communicate with the instructor directly and to engage with their peers in real dialogue. Paradoxically, it also reveals several challenges. While they have the ability to work at their own pace, these courses require self-discipline and the ability to teach themselves. While there's an increased opportunity for communication with instructors and engagement with peers, there's also the challenge of not having that interaction in some courses, particularly untimely responses to questions from instructors. Similarly, these classes involve an increased anonymity or a feeling of isolation, not being part of a learning community, but also a decreased anonymity in terms of your participation is recorded and logged and kind of required in these courses. There's also unclear requirements, expectations, and course organization is the final challenge that these students face. Faculty revealed several advantages and challenges that mirrored what the students said. The faculty find these courses to be very easy to create in terms of the fact that they can do this work from anywhere. They're not in the typical location at a typical time. They can do the work for the class at any time. They like making rich resources available to students, and they see these courses as an opportunity for increased assessment and feedback, as well as a way of pulling in all students for participation. In a traditional class, not all students may participate in discussion, but in an online discussion, you can see a record of all students participating, particularly shy students. While there's this flexibility in time, the faculty also report that one of the major challenges is that they don't have the ability to kind of shut off the course. It's a 24/7 course. This increases their workload, and it takes a lot of time in advance to prepare these courses. While they find this opportunity to increase student participation, they lack the interaction face-to-face, and they find it difficult to engage students. Finally, this requires self-discipline from students, as well as dealing with the normal technical issues that you face in an online environment. Both students and faculty offered recommendations to help mitigate several of these challenges. From the student side, they want faculty to provide timely responses and feedback, to be available to talk or meet, that's either synchronously or asynchronously, provide clear expectations with specific directions on course assignments, and most importantly, design the course so it's well organized and it's clear to navigate. Faculty recommended allowing more time for course planning, recognizing that the first time you do this it will not be smooth, and to seek out resources, other people who've done it, and those things, and to focus on your pedagogical needs. Why are you integrating technology into a blended course, or what strategies are you going to use in an online course for pedagogical reasons, not just for the sake of using technology on its own? we developed an e-toolbox to help speak to some of these recommendations, and Dr. Joe Madaus is going to speak on that now.
Quick question about the surveys.
Yes.
Were the students and faculty surveyed engaged in both face-to-face and online courses?
Some of the students were engaged in only blended courses, some were in both, and some were in online only. For our purposes, we're presenting them as the overall findings of the surveys and interviews.
There was also a question about UDI, and could the story be told about who sparked universal design at UConn? And there is actually some information about the development of universal design on our website, as well as on our faculty website. I will post both of those URLs. Okay.
All right, and so Dr. Joe Madaus.
Okay, thank you, Nick, and thank you everybody for joining us today. One thing I will say about the project here at UConn is that this is the third project, grant-funded project related to universal design for instruction, and so much of that information about the history is available on the website, as Kim had said. So we set about to build an e-toolbox that would reflect both the literature review that we conducted and the needs assessment. And this was conducted in 4 steps. Initially, we selected tools according to a cycle of course planning, course delivery, and course assessment. But we understand that each of those areas impact and directly influence each other, so they're definitely intertwined. And we also came to realize that based upon the needs assessment and the literature review, in the online environment, some of the principles could be grouped into 3 areas: cognitive access, communication access, and physical access, and I'll discuss those shortly. So we started off by identifying a broad range of e-tools that could be included on the toolbox, and we came up with a total of over 150. The second step was then to review those tools internally and select them, and then post them to the website for use by faculty. So those e-tools that were reviewed by a criteria that I'll show you in a moment, posted to the website, and then reviewed by our faculty panel who were at 5 institutions in the Northeast. And that represents a range of institutions as well. So the faculty used at least 2 of those e-tools in their courses during each semester, and we also asked them to have their students review the e-tools by a criteria that I'll show you again in a moment. Internally, our criteria for reviewing the tools consisted of these 5 areas. First was cost. We were looking for tools that were typically low or no cost, or coming in somewhere under $50. Although we do have to point out that when you look at the website, some of the tools will be over $100. Some of those tools are actually standard features of packages such as Microsoft Office or Adobe. And so if you have those packages on your computer, you'll have access to these tools at no cost. The second question was accessibility. And does the e-tool make the course content more attainable to a range of diverse learners? The third area was usability, and could the e-tool be easily implemented into the course by the faculty member? And can this be done without the need for support through instructional design teams? The idea was really user as faculty as designer, so they should be able to use that tool fairly easily. The next criterion was effectiveness. And does the e-tool produce an outcome that is selected by the faculty member based upon a particular pedagogical need? And finally, does that e-tool align with one of the principles of universal design for instruction? When we sent this out then to the faculty reviewers, we asked them to review based upon accessibility, usability, effectiveness, and application of UDI, following similar terms to those that I described before. The students also reviewed the e-tools, and we were asking them about their perceptions of the tool's accessibility, usability, and effectiveness from their perspective. And so really that's answering the question is, does that e-tool make it easier for students to access the course materials? And the results of both the faculty and the student reviews are posted on our website. So I'll stop for a second and see if there are any questions. Okay, so let's move into how you could use the e-Toolbox. And there is a direct link off the top navigation bar on the website. And if you click on the e-Toolbox, you'll come to a screen that looks like this, and it shows these 3 arrows. And here are the 3 access domains that I spoke to before. We want to point out, too, that these are arrows that interlink and inform each other. And so that is a very deliberate design. If you click on any one of these circles, you will bring up the definition of that access domain, and a double click will then take you to that part of the toolbox. So for example, if I were to click on cognitive access, it would take me to a page that looks like this. And here you'll see at the top the cognitive access arrow is highlighted. Underneath that you'll see the definition of cognitive access, which is referring to approaches and elements to assist diverse learners to acquire, comprehend, recall, apply, evaluate, integrate, and express information within a digital learning environment. Below that you'll see how this could be applied. And this relates directly to the materials that Nick just spoke about and the data from the interviews and the surveys. So for example, within cognitive access, the faculty and students suggested that cognitive access would be enhanced when course expectations are made explicit, topics are included in a logical sequence, directions regarding assignments are straightforward and easy to follow, and assessment is clear and directly linked to course objectives. Below that, you can see the 5 principles of universal design for instruction that relate to the area of cognitive access. And the next 2 screens I'll show you relate to communication access, and you'll see it's very similar with the definition and the application, and below the 2 domains that relate to that. And then finally physical access, again with the definition and application and link to the specific principles of universal design for instruction. And again, all of this can be found on our website, www.udi.uconn.edu. So then to access these specific e-tools, if you scroll down a little bit further, question popped up?
Given the confidentiality is an issue with students with disabilities, how were the students selected for the analysis?
The question was, given confidentiality issues, how were students selected for the analysis? Students with disabilities selected for the analysis? What we did was we asked the faculty member to ask all members of the class to complete the surveys, and when they completed the survey, they gave consent to go through the information and to self-disclose the disability, and all that information was kept confidential. In terms of interviews, we worked with the disability service offices at each of the institutions and solicited consent from the students directly before each interview. Okay. So in terms of how to access the e-tools, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see an icon that looks like this toolbox. And by clicking on that, you'll come to the e-tool library. We also did a little bit more grouping here. In particular, we did 11 areas or categories, and what you're seeing on your screen is the area of communication and collaboration. So suppose you were interested in figuring out ways to enhance the communication between you and your students, or ways that students could collaborate more directly. You could come directly to this portion of the e-tool library, and you'll see a series of e-tools listed out in this table. And what you see in the table are some of the main features, some of the limitations that we've identified and that have been identified by faculty members or within the literature, and then also a range of ideas for use. So this just kind of gets you thinking about some ways this could be used, and by no means is that list exhaustive. Creative faculty members may find other ways to use e-tools for different purposes. And then next you'll see the cost and how you can access that information. So if we were to click on one of these for example, YouTube, you would see a specific e-tool page. And each e-tool page comes with an introduction that provides an overview of the tool, both in text or an audio introduction that you could click on and hear that read to you. And then below are specific instructions on how to use that e-tool. So there's a PDF version with an instructional guide that you could download and use on your own. And then there's also video demonstrations on how to use those e-tools. And in a few moments, Manju Banerjee is going to show you a range of sample e-tools. But before she does that, I'd just like to point out a few caveats related to UDI and related to e-tools. The first is that UDI is not about instructional technology alone. The selection or use and selection of any e-tool needs to match a specific pedagogical need. And some e-tools could be used in different ways and have very different purposes, so the same tool could be used for different functions. Secondly, an e-tool alone is not an example of universal design for instruction. Rather, it's how the e-tool is used that defines how it exemplifies UDI. And as I mentioned before, single tools could be used in multiple ways and reflect different principles of universal design for instruction depending upon its application. And finally, not all e-tools will work for all students and provide access to all students. We're trying to provide access to as wide a range of students as possible, but some students will still require alternative formats or methods of delivery. So I'll pause now to see if there are any questions. No questions. So I will hand it off to Dr. Manju Banerjee, who will talk about some specific examples of e-tools.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to talk about the practical application of selected e-tools primarily from the perspective faculty member, but as you will see that these can be easily adapted to any instructional environment. Some of these e-tools are simple and easy to use, and others do have a bit of a learning curve. But I'm going to start with some practical applications of e-tools in the category organization, time management, and expectations. A simple one, which is a native feature of Word, is MS Word highlighting and the commenting tool. As you can see on your screen, it tells you about the types of strategies and related instructional approaches using this tool. I have used this tool to highlight elements within my syllabus that I want students to pay particular attention to. Due dates, particular assignment details, including both highlighting and a comment feature, really brings this information out for students who might have visual processing challenges. Another tool that's within the toolbox is the template of student resources. What we have included here are standard templates around academic policies, student code, drop-add information that is often distributed within the campus website, but once it is condensed and put inside the syllabus, is very easy for students to follow and go to and get the information. Next one. The assignment calculator is another tool which is really useful for a vast majority of students who have difficulty with time management, organization, and self-monitoring of setting priorities, etc. This is borrowed actually from the University of Minnesota. What this does, it takes students through a step-by-step process of when an assignment is due given the start date. So if you're doing a writing assignment, it tells you if you're starting today, here is what step 1 should be. This is what step 2 should be, by when you should be thinking of step 2, step 3, and so on. It is a really neat tool for courses that have writing assignments included that help students self-monitor their progress in getting to the assignment. The grade tracker, I'm particularly excited about this tool. We have used it often. I have included it in the syllabus for students to use. This was actually created by one of the graduate students here in the Center for Students with Disabilities at University of Connecticut. And what it is a program within Excel which allows the student to put in the anticipated grade at the end of the semester, the grade that they have currently received, together with the weights that these grades have been assigned by the faculty member, and then calculate what grades they must receive in the remaining assignments to get their anticipated grade, final grade, at the end of the semester. It is a really neat tool that keeps students on track in terms of being realistic about what they expect to achieve and how they expect to go about preparing for the assignments that'll get them the grade that they want at the end of the semester. Again, as you can see, these are tools that really help students with cognitive disabilities manage their assignments and manage the time and setting priority, all the executive functioning issues that our students with learning disabilities and or ADHD have challenges with. The next category area is assessing course content and engagement. We're going to talk about a few tools that reflect this area. A favorite tool of mine is particular features within Adobe Acrobat, and that is the commenting feature. The way I have used it as a faculty member is to have students actually insert comments within an article that they have to read online. I have also used it to insert my comments as a faculty member, drawing students' attention to particular areas that I want students to focus on as they are reading the manuscript. The neat part about this tool is students can insert both written comments as well as audio comments. So students have told me they have used this as their own study guide with embedded audio or written notes to themselves as they are preparing for an assignment or submitting an assignment. Just a footnote on this, I had students submit embedded notes in lieu of a critique, and after I had read 35 embedded notes on a 4-page article, I decided to limit the number of embedded comments. So just something to think about as you decide whether this is the tool for your course.
Manju, a quick question about grade tracker before we go to the next tool.
Yes.
You'll probably need to repeat the question, but the grade tracker looks a bit complex for individuals with cognitive disorders. How are they trained on the tool?
For each of the tools that we have in our, the question was, the grade tracker looks somewhat complicated for students with cognitive disabilities. How are they trained on the tool? For each of the tools that we have in our toolbox, there is a step-by-step description of how to use the tool. It looks complicated visually, but the step-by-step process really takes the students through it, and it's fairly easy to use. Other questions?
Yes, a question about then Adobe Acrobat and how to embed audio notes.
How to embed audio notes within within Adobe Acrobat is the question. You go to the commenting feature, and again, as I said for the previous question, all these step-by-step process of how to use these tools are on our website under the tool within the toolbox. But essentially for Adobe Acrobat, you go to the commenting feature and it opens up a menu of commenting feature options. And you select the audio feature. It opens up a little box which says record. You click on the red button, start recording. What it does when you shut the recording is a little icon with a megaphone kind of shows up, which shows that there is a recording, and you can actually just drag that recording to anywhere on the margin or within the text and embed it right there.
How do you assess the students' understandings of the tools?
again, that depends on the purpose for which you are using the tools. If the tools are meant as supports or scaffolds to understanding course content, then I'm not necessarily assessing the student's understanding of the tools. What I do have in my online courses is a comment which is a sentence which asks students whether they are able to follow the tools or not, and if they are not, then to email the class. And it's really interesting how many peers then jump in to explain a certain navigational issue or a technical issue that a particular student might have. It creates its own dialog box and takes on a life of its own. Other questions?
Yes. Can the presenter relate the section of highlighting tools to the topic of universal design for instruction?
Yes, the question was relating highlighting tool to universal design for instruction. Again, what we've tried to do is, while we have a generic mapping between the tool and the features of the tool and the principles of UDI, what we've discovered is a one-on-one mapping is generally not useful, because a single tool can be used in multiple ways, and depending on the strategic use of that tool, it could apply to Principle 1 or Principle 2 or Principle 7. But to answer your question, highlighting creates for flexibility in use, for example. So for students who have difficulty with visual processing, the highlighting helps draw attention to what is important and what the faculty member wants that particular student to focus on within a syllabus or within a text that they are required to read.
One last question about Adobe Acrobat. Do you have students insert comments on the same document or on a separate version of the document?
It is the document is posted on their the course website, and then the students download that with their name on it, and then they embed their comments and then submit that on the assignment section of the website. All right, the next slide. Audacity. Audacity is a free downloadable tool which is essentially a recorder. It will record, you can have it running in the background of your laptop and record a conversation that is happening either in a classroom setting. The way many of my students have used it in blended classes is to record during office hours. When the students come in, they will let the faculty member know, do you mind if I record what you're explaining to me or information that you're providing? And this will record in the voice of the person speaking. It is very clear, I would say, till about 10 feet, 8 to 10 feet, really great recording. I don't necessarily recommend students use it in the large classrooms, but for office hours and small discussion groups, it's a great tool instead of the good old-fashioned tape recorder, which was the thing in my time. Let's look at another tool, and again, I won't go through every tool. These are some selected tools. Jing is something which I have used, and I know, Joe, you've used it as well, in the classroom when you want students to navigate to a certain section. What Jing is, it's a screen capture. So it captures the screen, and you can actually be talking to the information that is on the screen, and students then hear your voice as you're explaining, let's say, a flow chart that's on the screen, or a particular diagram or a visual. It's really, really helpful. I have a step-by-step process, for example, for how students should, how staff should review documentation, and I talk through my steps. And this is something students in the classroom who are taking the course on accessibility can actually see and follow. There's a free version and a paid version. The free version only captures for about 2 minutes, so 5 minutes. So I would recommend, if you want to capture something with visual and audio components, the paid version is where you want to go. A couple of more tools.
There was a question about Audacity.
Oh yes.
Use of audio would restrict universal design rather than promote access. If there were transcription done to round off the audio to make it universal.
That's a great question. Let me repeat that question. Sorry? The question was essentially around the tool Audacity and the fact that it is an audio recorder, and how would it be universally designed for those who might have, who might need a script version of the audio recording. Again, I think, and Ron May said this, that the use of the term universal in defining universal design, and in particular universal design for instruction, is unfortunate in that tools, different tools, work for different individuals. The idea of universal design is to anticipate diversity and to create the educational environment which anticipates different needs. However, not every single tool will be appropriate for every different learning style or learning need. Oh, you can hear the question. Okay, perfect. All right, any other questions before we move on to more tools? All right, I'm going to skip over this because I want to get to some of the other tools, Kim. Let me talk about Twitter. And again, I won't go into the some of the philosophical underpinnings around using social media such as Facebook and Twitter in course delivery for online and blended courses, but to say we have faculty member who teaches a course in ornithology and uses Twitter to have students go out into the field and then tweet their sightings and information about bird particulars that they have seen. It is a tool that the students are very excited about using, love using it. They're always with their smartphones, so the tool really works well for particular courses, is what I would say. Moving on then to assessment tools. Unless there's a question, Kim, on this? No. Some of the tools within the toolbox around assessment, in particular, this is the Rubrics tool, and what it does is gives faculty a grading yardstick, if you will, for different elements of the assignment and how to assign grades for it. So what it does is, instead of having to recreate the rubric, faculty members can use some of these specific can use a specific language within these rubrics in their syllabi to describe their grading policy. Again, a nice, easy, handy tool for faculty to adapt depending on their needs within their syllabi. Test banks, we have within the e-toolbox test banks, and it again is a sample of different tools that faculty can use and adapt for particular courses. Just being aware that there might be a test bank on a particular section in an anthropology course is another additional resource that faculty can use with their students in these online and blended courses. MS Word, the outlining and the hyperlinks feature. And again, just to emphasize that different tools can be used in different ways by different faculty. Joe talked about the faculty as designer, and that is one of the underlying premises of the toolbox and the tools. I have used MS Word hyperlinks within my syllabi. So while the course does include a section within each module for each week, which has links to the readings, my syllabi also had links within it to each of the readings. So students can access the links from multiple sources. A couple of other tools that we also just included this section as a resource on UDI. There is a host of resources that are available. If you go to the next slide, you will see them and the topics that are covered. Just again, an additional resource for you for UDI online for students with cognitive disabilities. Questions? This is just as we're talking about resources, wanted to draw your attention to the fact that we have professional development modules on the website. There are professional development modules on the history of UDI as it's applied to instruction, a module on learning disabilities, a module on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a module on legal mandates. So again, these are additional information that might be of use both to faculty, administrators, staff, as they look to use the tools in application of the principles of UDI in their particular role and responsibility. And finally, technical briefs. Again, another resource, technical briefs, and as you will see on your screen, we have technical briefs on topics which include pedagogy and evidence-based practices, faculty perspectives and perceptions, again, both based on the review of the literature in the field as well as our own research and needs assessment. Finally, also more resources on diverse learners. I think I mentioned this earlier. We have a resource that particularly talks about the issues with students with learning disabilities, definitions, characteristics, evidence-based practices, and the focus is on post-secondary students with learning disabilities and or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We are now going to do a quick poll. The question is, how likely are you to visit the UDI at UConn website after this presentation, this webinar? Well, it does look like we have the larger percentage of participating audience saying they are very likely to visit the website. And the last poll question, how likely are you to share the information presented with a colleague? The numbers are coming in, but as we look at the numbers again, the vast majority appear to suggest that they would be willing to share this information with colleagues. Open to questions at this time. Please do post your questions and we will be happy to address them.
So there's a question, how can I access or save the notes from this presentation for future reference? This presentation has been recorded, and we will post the PowerPoint along with the recording on the website, which again is www.udi.uconn.edu.
We're going to wait for some more questions.
More comment than a question. It's interesting that the tools you showed are not what I think of as ADA tools. They are things people are already using. We just need to use them intentionally and perhaps learn better their capabilities.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. There really has been a blurring of the line in recent years between tools that are more assistive or adaptive in nature and tools that are more mainstream. And that is the underlying premise of universal design, that these tools are used by the whole continuum of students with different disabilities, severe disabilities, to students without any disability. But a great comment.
Have you collected data regarding the impact of using these tools?
Anecdotally, yes. Plenty of data. In terms of a scientifically designed research study, not yet. But another great question.
Just a follow-up to that, do you have plans to do so?
Yes, if we get another grant, definitely.
Next question, how do you find the balance between UDI and ADA? That is, not every tool will work for every student, but how do you prepare for as many students as possible? And when do you stop and say, I've prepared enough?
Well, I think, this is Joe, I think in that case what you need to make sure is in your syllabus and in your conversations with students, either face-to-face as part of the blended component or online, is that you have that ability, or students have the ability to talk to you at any time about disclosure and their particular learning needs, and you would still be willing to accommodate those specific learning needs if they're not met through the e-tools or through the universal design approaches that you've incorporated into the class. So I think it's really a question of being open to both. I don't think one precludes the other.
Mind you here, and I'll just add to what Joe just said, using these tools, whether it is in the planning, delivery, or assessment, and moving towards a more UDI designed course, does not preclude the use of accommodations by some students with disabilities in the classroom, and that has definitely been our experience.
And one other question that's come up is related to, again, how do the specific tools relate to specific principles of UDI? And again, we have to stress that it really depends upon how the tool is used and for what purpose. So, for example, within Audacity, that question came up, and so there are multiple ways. Manju talked about one principle, but it could also be in terms of simple and intuitive, where you have somebody with a reading problem. Hearing it might help them to find that information more clearly, or it might then relate to perceptible information as well. So there's multiple ways that a particular e-tool might relate to the principles, again, depending upon its use, depending upon how the student receives it.
We have a question. What are your thoughts on using UDI designs for all online courses?
Well, of course, we're biased, and we would love to see, faculty and instructional design teams become as aware as possible about universal design for instruction, and to have that become one of the core pieces of the instructional design process well at the outset of designing an online or a blended course. So we would really like to see elements of this incorporated in universally, if you will.
What laws, current or expected, would apply to UDI application?
The Tech Act 1998 would definitely apply. Some of the web C3 accessibility issues intersect with the principles of UDI. We're talking in terms of students transitioning from high school to college. The IDA language around the transition plan and use of technology, definition of assistive technology device and assistive technology services, and understanding the differences between that and the Americans with Disabilities Act, again, would be more of a peripheral application, but definitely something service providers would need to be aware of in looking at the intersection between the laws and the principles of UDI.
And also, it's important to point out that the most recent amendment to the Higher Education Act specifically talks about universal design and has specific language related to universal design in its application in higher education.
Another question, what do you see as the most critical message to communicate to faculty when developing a new online course?
I think our needs assessment really highlights and underscores some of the issues for faculty in teaching an online course. What we've learned in terms of our own experiences is definitely the planning, the 3-cycle planning, delivery, and assessment. They, as Joe said, kind of feed into each other. And so while thinking about planning and to implement principles of UDI, you also need to be thinking about the delivery as well as the assessment.
And the needs assessment also clearly showed, both on the faculty and student end, is the need to be as clear and direct and explicit as possible in all phases of the course, because you may assume that you're being clear, but for some students, if they can't see you to ask you those questions, they've missed out. So that came through, again, both from the students and from the faculty, followed closely by the need to communicate and increase collaboration, both between faculty and students and among students. The need for that networking was evidently clear in both the faculty and the student interviews and surveys.
If I could just add, faculty often actually do use many of the tools, the strategies, the features that we've talked about in our toolbox. They might not have used the language of UDI. What this toolbox does is put all this together in one place for faculty to access and adapt to their needs. But UDI, our experience is, has already been happening in many online courses. It's just referenced differently.
Let me just see if there are any further questions. If I could, while we're waiting to see if there are any more questions, I'll give you one other example of how a tool could be used in different ways. Manju has showed you the comment feature in Adobe or the comment feature in Word. So certainly that can be used to help scaffold a journal article or some sort of technical piece where you really want the students to get the highlights. I've also used that in terms of, I've had students build wikis at the end of the semester, and then to grade them, I'll make PDFs of them and use the comment feature to provide direct feedback to the students. So I can, instead of grading a hard copy, I can drop comments right in where I want them to see them. And again, I could type them or I could use audio. You can also use Audacity in discussion postings in classes, so students who might prefer to record their responses can do that instead of posting a typed response. Or I've also used Audacity to read the prompt to students, so students with a reading disability both can read it and hear it at the same time.
We do have another question. Do you find the UDI tools improves time efficiency of planning for and implementing online and blended courses?
And again, lacking any hard data, what I will say where it has increased my efficiency in terms of the planning and delivery of online course has been less questions being asked by students because it is clear and it addresses and anticipates differences in learning style and learning approaches of the class. So definitely saves time in terms of going back and forth with responding to students.
Yeah, I would echo that as well. I think that maybe the first time or a couple of times that you're using it, it might not save time on the planning stage, but it will certainly save time on the delivery and likely the assessment stage, because these pieces have been thought out and are all directly linked together.
Another question, what other resources do you recommend for faculty who are new to online education?
One of the things I will say for faculty who are new to online education is definitely to work collaboratively with your IT team on campus. It really helps to do that planning. And then I will add another campus constituency, and that is the Disability Services Office.
And then within the reports on the website, you'll also see some suggestions from faculty related to this. And there are a range of professional resources. They talk about also connecting with other colleagues who have taught online and getting feedback from them about what works and what doesn't work. And I believe one of the comments was related to not reinventing the wheel. So you don't get a flat tire, but talk to somebody who's already experienced it and learn from them.
How would you respond to your IT department who looks to DSS for guidance on online course tools?
Good question. And I think what it is really is campus in service, really talking, offering to host workshops where all parties involved are present. I think it's really important, and this is not, this is something which is familiar to many of you, I'm sure, is that providing access is a campus-wide responsibility. It is not just the Disability Services Office responsibility or any other office, IT or otherwise. So I think the more opportunities there are to engage IT, faculty, disability services, media services, the bookstore, the more it makes for sharing the responsibility for providing equal access, but also for providing universal design.
And we would also say, too, that this is not, these approaches will not just benefit students with disabilities, but they'll benefit a range of other students on campus with diverse learning needs, and even traditional learners who might just have different preferences within a particular course. Remember at the beginning of the presentation, for example, we talked about veterans with disabilities. There may be many on campus who veterans on campus who have disabilities but have not self-disclosed that, and maybe in your classes. And some of these techniques may help them better access the course materials. Students who English is a second language learner, non-traditional students, they can benefit from these tools as well.
Please share any future plans your team has regarding UDI.
Well, we are nearing the end of this particular grant funding cycle, and we're very interested in pursuing future opportunities. Our plan is over the next few months is to publish much of the data that we've been collecting, to continue to look at refining this website and doing some additional presentations, and continuing to look at ways to expand what we'd like to do, for example, is work with instructional designers to incorporate this in a widespread fashion on campuses. So if anybody's aware of funding opportunities, please feel free to pass those along.
It says, thank you very much for hosting this information. I look forward to learning more and seeing how my department can incorporate some of the tools.
Before we wrap up and lose people, we just have one last question for all of you. We have an idea of roughly how many connections we have right now, but we're interested in knowing how many people are actually on the webinar. So if you could just type in, please, how many people are at your site attending the webinar right now, we would appreciate that.
And another question while people are responding to that, any advice for working with faculty who are resistant to e-tools and or use inaccessible ones?
That's a good question.
That's another great question.
Perhaps what we would suggest is, as far as using e-tools, is starting small and showing the benefit of one easily implementable one, and then kind of building off of that.
To add to what Joe just said, one of the things approach that we've taken here is to start with 3 Ds, department heads, directors, and deans. And if we can get buy-in from them, it's often an easier road to get to individual faculty.
Okay, there seem to be no additional questions, so we would again like to thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us, and hopefully you'll visit and benefit from the website. Thank you very much.
Thank you.